Okay. Sorry about that. The stream apparently went down. I actually don't know where this is going now, so give me a moment to find it. As I again have no idea where it's actually going. I think OBS crashed. Yeah, it crashed. And so for that, give me a minute. If you're still watching on some channel, I have actually no idea where. There we go. All right, yeah. So apparently the stream crashed. So I apologize. If you're watching on the old link, I will respond. Um, yeah. There's the updated link. Now been posted. Thank you all for your patience. I am so sorry about that. Yeah. So basically, yeah, there was a little bit of a hiccup there on everything. So I do apologize for that. Uh, and game. Thank you for the compliment. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone. Trying to get all this settled, but we just had OBS crash, so I apologize for that. Um, Thank you all for joining. If you are on the new link, if you are not, I will do my best to hopefully get that circulated. Because apparently the stream crashed, and some people are not able to view again. So um, I will not have the chat up in the stream right now as it's on the old one. I apologize for the inconvenience. And yeah, so again, OBS, having fun with that. Everybody else seems to have that issue, and so some people are figuring out that the stream crashed and are messaging me on the signal number. I apologize if you joined in the other one and there was an issue. Um, please join in the new one. Yeah. So anyway, so I've talked about it over the last few weeks, and a lot of people have kind of questioned like what's up with certain things and how these things work, and trying to educate people on the realities of and the dangers of mobile phones and the dangers of these services and things like that. It's important to note that like there's a lot of this stuff that is not very well documented on processes, and then there's a lot of stuff that also is unknown to most people. For example, and I didn't get a chance to really deep dive into that today in this article. There's going to be another article tomorrow or Saturday. We have to record some things, and the recording is basically going to be of the demonstration of like how to utilize this information to be a bad actor. Now we are testing only on ourselves as the bad actor, or myself and a friend of mine. We own the numbers, the devices. This is important because you don't want to get in trouble on a legality standpoint, and so it's very critical that we kind of cover this information from a perspective of, you know, like this is what you should do, proper disclosure, how proper disclosure works. And for those of you who are unsure what proper disclosure is, a proper disclosure is like, for example, the issue was reported to me because of an anon who literally had no idea that that wasn't the expected behavior on Signal. And so, because of that, it led me down a rabbit hole. And the rabbit hole that we found was some of the other issues that were pointed out today. And so, basically, what's going on is that, we're trying to educate people on the dangers of mobile phones and also the mobile phone security model. And thank you for the compliment again. And basically, thanks, Biff. Yeah, like basically what we're trying to do here is to educate people on the dangers of mobile phones verification. Now, in the article, I point out where it could be used as a targeting device. Now, this targeting could also be done by law enforcement or a nefarious actor, a stalker. It could be used by anyone, really. Database dumps and carrier reuse and temporary number provisions, things like that, those are all dangerous. And so what I'm trying to do here is we're trying to educate people on the risks that are involved with some of these services, but also trying to highlight, some of the things that are going on. Like the Canadian number now that you can contact me on that I posted in the tweet for going live, which by the way the live stream went down for that, and I apologize. So I've since switched, and we're just using this one. And one of the things that goes on is that fact that like a lot of people have no idea like why companies are still using SMS registration, which makes no sense. But there is this belief that you own your number, and that there's this belief that the number will stay in your possession. But as pointed out, there are a lot of times and cases in society where people no longer have access to the number, lost it, financial hard times. I know that seems crazy for a lot of people, but it is a harsh reality for some who live, making hard decisions because they have to decide, what's more important, the food or their family, or their phone. Or, an emergency expense, doctors, a number of things. And so what happens is they end up relying on some of these public information services or these public telephone services. And also on journalistic and on protesters and things like that, they also tell people, hey, use Signal, but, set up a not your number. And this is where it gets sketchy, because literally you use one of these services and someone else could unlock it if you didn't set a proper PIN or a registration lock. Which also, if you read the article and you use Signal, please go to your settings on your device, set a registration lock, set a PIN, use the max link PIN, I think it's 8 or 10 characters, I forget, and use it. Like, do not take that lightly. And like I said, this is a user issue, and I've been in conversations with Signal about it. And, we've been going over everything. And, what's going on is that we are essentially able to, in some cases, if you set up for these public services, in a lot of cases, we're actually able to become another person. Just putting it point blank. Now, the risk here is not necessarily that, there is a problem with that. The risk here is that what happens if law enforcement does that? What happens if an agency does this to you or to an associate of yours, and now all of a sudden they get, some incriminating things and responses, that kind of stuff from you. And what you have to understand is that cryptography is a great tool, but it can either help you or hang you. And when I say that, I don't mean like, it's going to put you in this position where you're going to die or you could die. What I'm getting at is the fact that like it's cryptographic or mathematical proof in the case that it is you. So it'll either protect you that you weren't involved in the situation, or it could hang you and literally declare that you were there involved with it. Also, there's a thing about deterministic keys and various other things that people need to understand, which I plan to be writing a bunch of articles about this. These are things that apparently people don't understand and people have requested. Now, I'm giving a shout out to Kaz and Kyle Caspianzi and for helping proofread, Loki for helping me with proofreading as well, and Terminal Cipher, and also I want to give a shout out to Kyle Gibson for encouraging me and encouraging others to do long form articles. Usually most people try to keep a 4 to 5 minute article. This article is 18 minutes, but it had to be that long. Also want to give a shout out to Sabotage Beats for part of the experimentation last night, and the Anon, who originally reported this to me as a Signal misbehavior because he was a new user, and that was where the conversation started on, was a Tuesday night. And he was receiving messages for somebody that wasn't him and didn't have contacts for these people and didn't understand it. And so that led down this long hole, rabbit hole of discovery. Now, where this gets really dangerous is the fact that a lot of these services don't even have an account structure system like Signal does, or at least you can lock it with a verification pin, things like that. Telegram doesn't do this, by the way. So in Telegram, you can easily become someone else if you can get the number. Now, in the article, I kind of put it out there as like understanding that, you know, a carrier can reissue a number, and this happens all the time. You can get a reused number from a various number of services, that kind of thing. Now, you may ask yourself, why is that important for like a targeting perspective? Well, database dumps, but also recon. Now, you may not look at recon as this very viable resource, but recon is very dangerous. And what I mean by recon is quietly being able to, and passively being able to take information collected from another person and applying it to 2 to 3 degrees and being able to obtain the target that you're after. So for example, say for example, I am after, I don't know, user A. Now I'm user D. Okay, user D wants to get to A. So what can I do? I can contact user C because I may have a loose-knit relationship with C, and I have a firm belief that C has contacts with B, and B to A. So what can happen here is that I can utilize various targeting methods through database dumps or knowing them through other applications. And if I know situations such as they're going to change phone numbers or they use temporary number services, I can actually abuse that to become that person. And this is where, from a spyware, stalkerware, that kind of mentality, this is where your phone's being used against you. Okay? Now, you may not be the target. Okay? You may be the target. That's up to the person who is the attacker. However, you want to always go up the rung of the ladder. This is what law enforcement does. This is what individuals do. So when you break this down into perspective, what you start to see is that you're able to chain this to becoming a literal attack vector against like an organization, or even worse, it becomes a passive listening, because we were able to do it with Telegram as well. And yeah, sure, I can work on that in just 1 second, Biff. I'll describe that in detail. And so basically what we were able to do with Telegram and a few other apps, including not limited to some of the ones that were listed in the article, and again, we're going to proper disclosure for some of those. We were able to prove that we could become someone else. Now, that someone else was us, because that's how you do these types of things, right? You never do it to a live target. Doing that would be implicit of illegality. But we wanted to see how safe it was against ourselves. Which I don't have Facebook or an Instagram, so I had to do some of those setups. I have an old Instagram, so people have pointed out I haven't used it in years. I don't even have access to it. I don't even know how to get connected to it. Thanks, Diverter. Glad you joined. Biff, so a database dump, for people who aren't privy to the types of database dumps, is you have a database dump that usually comes from an exposed database, so hackers get a hold of it, dump it. There's usually hashed, passwords, that kind of stuff. And then the other type that a lot of people don't understand is what's called the dark market database dump. Now, you may not be privy to this, but in areas where there's large tech companies or a large population or a large congregation of these people that work there, various companies, users or employees may sell data from the database from a specific user. Now, you may say to yourself, well, that's illegal. Yes, and so are a lot of other things, but people still do them. And what you see here and what happens is that these individuals have an underground market. It's not done with Bitcoin, it's not done with Monero, it's done face-to-face via SneakerNet. So say, for example, someone wants Facebook credentials or Instagram credentials or, Uber data, that kind of stuff. They do share this information. Oftentimes it's an exchange. Oftentimes it may be just like, hey, buy, give me a couple $100 or give me this, give me that, and I'll provide that data to you. People forget that people have bills to pay and stuff like that. Especially in the Bay Area, it's very common. And so like it's a thing. And, those are two of the prevalent methods. The other methods are, leaks, things like that happen from application poor security, things like that. But in the reality of things is that what you start to see is that there are data brokerage that are going on multiple tiers. Now, this data brokerage can be either hash passwords, or it could just be the data that is contained, or it could be an API key that's giving someone access to read a specific user's information through tooling. So keep in mind that when you start breaking all this down, the old days of Word Island, when we used to, in the video that I showed, there were, basically it's from the movie War Games, and you see that he's putting in a block and we're calling these numbers. Now we don't have to do that. Now we actually have information to target who we want to target without having to call the blocks, without having to see what other secondary numbers, third numbers, that kind of stuff. Now we can actually get that data directly from various sources, whether it be through illicit means of the deep web, or a public dump, or even better, someone just posts a bunch of shit on Pastebin because they're pissed off and they quit a company, or you can buy it directly. And so because of this information is then traded or utilized in a way to be able to create targeted attacking. Now, again, the people oftentimes who are the first series in the attack, if they are the target, are usually like victims of stalkers or victims of identity thieves who want like access to their cryptocurrencies, access to their PayPals, that kind of stuff. The other types of people are people who are law enforcement and others who are trying to go up a rung to figure out who else they know. Now remember, metadata on your phone, metadata through apps like Signal, Telegram, and others are also, pretty easily detectable, and you can parse a lot of this yourself, mainly because it's available tools for this. And so one of the things that we have been trying to do, well, I say we, myself and others, in the hacker community and everything like that, is that we are trying to help educate people the understanding of the risk. Now, last week I described the vectors of big tech and why they're dangerous. This week I released a full-fledged article that describes how one huge attack vector that most of the apps that you rely on, including privacy-centric apps, are actually done through a telephone registration process. Telephone registration processes are flawed inherently. And the reason they are flawed is because of the fact that one user could specifically take and literally be able to do some of the things that we were talking about and discuss them or abuse them against said user. And so what happens is that you run into this misunderstanding about what we mean about privacy. So, and privacy is not free. And I hate to say that because it ultimately creates a marginalized group. However, just like in Bitcoin, not your keys, not your coins, it also applies to your number, not your data. Never forget that. If it is not your number that you're paying for, it can be reused and it will be reused. As suggested in the article, we could use GPG methods for various things and prevent these types of issues from occurring with registration flow. This takes engineering time and works, but it also creates other types of problems for certain types of applications because they rely on certain types of centralized databases and things like that. And, and basically what we are starting to see now is that like a lot of people got their eyes open today and being able to visibly see the processes and not just understand that, it's me, this bearded fucking idiot or asshole, however you want to look at me, calling these things out. Now, instead, you yourself can go in and start looking at this stuff yourself. You can actually set up these apps, watch the workflows, go do some research, see how some of these people are utilizing this. Now, again, like I said, protesters and activists and journalists, they use a lot of, and also the links to the articles in there, they support and promote the use of a disposable style number. Problem is that they can be reused. The other issue is that maybe or maybe not, depending on the person or depending on the device, it may or may not get properly notified that the safety number has changed. I'm about to ask you a question in chat. How many people in chat have ever had a device safety number changed for one of your contacts? And have you ever verified it, that they meant to change devices or that it was intentional? Because that's a real thing, right? Like, how many of you have actually had that happen and called into question because you were unsure of what was going on? And then, like, do you have a fallback method to verify with your contacts whether or not they intended to change their safety number. Now, this may sound silly, but what happens if, like, they got locked up and they didn't tell you? What happens if they let their bill lapse because they were detained? Or any number of things that you weren't privy to? Now, all of a sudden, you may be talking to someone who is not that person. And that's a real risk. Mr. Chu, countries that respect privacy of their citizens, from my understanding, no real country actually does. We like to pretend they do. We like to make laws that they do, and yeah. Yeah, as I pointed out, Biff, good point. As I pointed out in the article too about your contacts list, you should review them. How many people do you talk to on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis? If you're not having contact with these people, Switzerland does, but again, there's also violations on everything. Privacy is a distinct game of where you are and what it applies to. Now, in regards to like SIM swapping, this is another vector that was also brought up. It's much harder to do, but it's just as effective. And SIM swapping has long been a crutch in the cryptocurrency world, but also it should be a crutch in the privacy world of people communicating. Yes, my point exactly, Diverger. These things are realistically threats. Same thing with Telegram, same thing with anything. So it is very important for you to understand and to prune your contact list. Mainly because they're going to get those, you're going to get those notifications, and you're not going to be able to verify them if you don't have another means of verification. And I know this sounds silly, but honestly, if you don't have a secondary form of validation for someone, really you should question whether or not they should be in your contacts. And, Signal is a great tool if you use correctly, but Signal can also be a dangerous tool. Same thing with Telegram, same thing with any software. And again, as pointed out in the post, you have to look at the fact that there's no silver bullet for software. There's no silver bullet for technology in any way, shape, or form. And with that being said, these models permit certain types of attack vectors that can be utilized against you. And again, like I said, a contact that you met 3 years ago, you vaguely remember, now is on Signal or now is on Telegram. Don't engage with that person, like, at all. Because you don't know if it is that person. You don't know who that really is unless they send you a message. Yes, Mr. Chu, that's a great model. It's more disposable devices and the IMEIs and only PGP to provide verification. That would be a sound model for application developers to adopt. And basically what happens there is that these people are able to validate you through a public key, which they would be able to also utilize if you tied it to an email or not. It doesn't really matter. You can also create multiple public keys off of a single private key, depending on who you're conversation with and depending on who the contact may be, that kind of stuff. And, you should have the ability to be able to throw off. There is that model to be the bouncing off mini IMEIs. However, you want to be very careful with that, because what if you have a bad actor who prevents the message from being delivered? So you have to consider that also, Mr. Chu, as a vector. You want to try to not rely on as many hops as possible. It is a good policy to utilize some hops, but it is not a good policy to be able to do as many hops through multiple layers. And what you got to do is you got to look at the fact that there are many dangerous risks that are involved, and there are many bad actors involved, including in Tor. There are bad actors who run bad relays, bad bridges, those types of things. Same thing in social media, distributed services. There are also bad people, bad actor peers, bad actor everything. So we talk about trustless. We have to create forms of trustless communications that when they rely on a communication channel, that we have some way of getting a semi-guaranteed delivery or some type of path of delivery. And so that's where, interesting things are going to come on, and that's where, we have to, as developers and hackers and the community alike, have to come together and figure out ways of doing things the correct way. Now, when I say hacker, I don't necessarily mean a security researcher. I mean a programmer, someone who does hack jobs, someone who is involved actively in development, that kind of thing. When we break this down, is this a problem with a specific app? No. Is this a problem with several specific apps? Yes, because they all use the phone registration workflow. And again, going back to pointing to phones, and also we create a walled garden with the phone registration, right? Because now you have to have a phone for some type of registration flow. As pointed out in the article, Gmail, things like that, all use this as a flow. Also, if you start clicking on the links that I provided at the bottom there, you will see real people getting real updates to some of these text messages for real life things that they are doing. And some are scammers, some are legit people, some are people who don't have a phone. And you may say to yourself, well, if they don't have a phone, why should they care about communication? They should definitely care about communication, because what if it's their only means of communicating with their family? What if they don't have a consistent access to the internet, besides Wi-Fi in a public place, that kind of stuff? And as security minded as you can be, you have to respect that. You have to understand that your case versus someone else's case is never going to be the same. I really want, to encourage you to take the information I provided and do some experimentation of your own. I'm not telling you to go look up database dumps and stuff like that, but you could if you wanted to. It's perfectly fine to find them. I will not provide you any links because that right there could imply a bunch of legal stuff that I'm encouraging nefarious and malicious behavior, blah 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 blah, and not trying to get into that game. So, what we need to understand is that when we break this down, the phone registration flow is the problem. We already know that two-factor authentication with SMS is flawed. It's been proven numerous times. But now we are, we wanted to be able to, want to be able to demonstrate that there is a real flaw in the registration flow. And I just got a question over Signal, by the way, so I'm going to answer that. Can we try to give a solution for those who don't have cash for a phone and how they could get a Gmail or something? So if you need an email service that's privacy focused, and yes, this may sound stupid, but there is a perception issue, and a lot of people do want the Gmail thing. One of the things that you could do is you could use Proton Mail, which their free service literally is pretty good. The free service does not give you certain features, but it does work, and it works really well, and it does provide you the privacy. And so far, there have not been any issues. Knock on wood. The other thing that you could do is, if you had a trusted friend or an associate, you could use their landline and or a business landline and or a in whatever case, maybe a payphone if you had to. Those are still dangerous, because then that verification process could be attempted to be, that that could also be circumvented. The other thing is that if they had someone that they trusted, a family member, something like that, that they could utilize as a registration flow. But overall, because they require the phone registration flow for Gmail or some form of comms, and same thing with Signal, and same thing with Telegram, these are dangerous, and using these public services are going to allow people to circumvent certain things. And the dangerous part is like I said, if you go look at those numbers, you can begin to realize that there are a lot of people who are using them for the activation of Signal, activation of Telegram, even activation of their PayPal, activation of banking account information, Instagram, Facebook, those kinds of things. And, it becomes this big issue where, what is the appropriate action? And, it's hard to come up with this. But the real answer to this, to answer the Signal question that I just got, is that we should not require phone registration, at all. That workflow should be decommissioned and no longer supported. And it should not be something that is the default on anything. And we should not support we should not support it. And like I said, I am just trying to be realistic here. We should never support these types of models because what they do is they compromise users, and then they put them in a dangerous position, and it also marginalizes people. Again, what happens when they don't have money? What happens when they're in a financial straits? What happens when they're in an issue? And a bind, and they got to make a choice between their family or whatnot. These are real problems. This diverter, those numbers are blocked, by the way. 555 is a reserve block. If you looked at the article, there is a numbering scheme that is used. There's actually quite a few of blocked and reserved number sets that you can't use. Hence why we have to reuse, because there's only a maximum number of 10 billion, and I know that sounds like a lot, but that's for the entire North American continent. That includes businesses, subsidiary businesses, reference lines, emergency lines, call centers, all that kind of stuff, and cell phones. So you have to take all those numbers into consideration, not to mention some numbers can never be reissued again because of federal legislation that are under investigation, that kind of stuff. There are a myriad of laws about that. And while 10 billion sounds like a lot, when you start breaking that down for states and things like that, and you calculate businesses and number of lines and that kind of stuff, you begin to start breaking that down. Same thing with like the IPv4 problem that we have. There's a limited subset of them. And then on reserve blocks for like the MTNs and things like that, you can't get certain numbers issued. That's why they use 555, because it's unroutable. It's a non-existent number. And now there are also reserved area codes that people don't know about that are backwards and they're government related, which if you've ever read the Anarchist Cookbook, it discloses some of those things. A CBDC identity all run off government servers, that's dangerous. We should never do that, and we should never rely on the government for identity services. It's bad enough that a lot of things actually require it now for like identification and stuff, but we should never rely on government for the private sector. This would stifle innovation and create a number of problems that we only are now starting to see in the approach that we've taken already. Governments are trying to end encryption. They're also constantly granted access unwarranted from, businesses that collect data on us. So there is this real give and take here, and that's part of the reason why, like I also mentioned about the use of distributed networks, distributed services. Because, like, say for example, you did not need Twitter. You could use Mastodon and never need a phone verification setup. You could use RetroShare and literally have a Facebook amongst the people that you know and love and everything like that, and still not need which would behave like your Instagram and things like that. But it would be controlled. You control your content. Only people that you've permitted to be in your circles are permitted to see it. And from there, you would never need phone verification either. So there's a lot of give and take that we have to understand, and in this community, and especially the niche people who, and my group of friends and associates, and thank you all again for your support and tuning in always. We believe in distributed technologies. We believe in distributed networkings. We believe in these services. Well, those require operators. But as operators, they require support. They require people using the service and an initiative to continue. Like Sabotage Beats myself, we set up the privacy first social. It gets activity. There are people daily actives. I try to be daily active on there. Sometimes I forget about it. Sometimes I'm not near a device that has the app installed, or sometimes I literally can't get to there because I'm on certain networks, that kind of thing. And so, we have to look at it from a standpoint of, individuals and the users and that kind of stuff are really the people who are going to drive the future. People say, oh, well, I want to use distributed systems. I don't want to be on Twitter. But the reason they stay on Twitter is because that's where the people are. Now, how to change that is people get off of Twitter. How you change that? Get off of Facebook, get off of Instagram, get off of insert service here. Many of these services like Facebook, or actually specifically Instagram, has turned into nothing more than glorified marketing. Basically, Lifehacker the other day and Gizmodo, and then we're talking about like it's nothing more than a shopping mall, just online. So the problem is you have a huge user base. Because you have a huge user base, people stay. But remember, MySpace used to have a huge user base. That has changed. Now, the other thing that some people had asked me about, and I also got this in a Signal question, is how do I feel about the PayPal stuff with regards to Bitcoin? It is a BS. Just marketing ploy, and that's it. And that is literally the truth. Like, literally, PayPal is doing nothing more than a marketing scheme, which they're going to control the currency, by the way. You don't get anything. It literally just goes to US dollar to the merchants, whatever, even if you want to pay in Bitcoin or whatnot. You can't deposit, you can't withdraw. Now, whatever you want to say, hear me out. I wrote an article about this last year. I also talked about it on DYOR podcast, and I've talked to a few people about this. Banks will censor their Lightning-like network. It will work. It will work. Yes. Will you be able to send out of their bands? No. Will you be able to use anything that's not their server? No. Will you be able to send to any address you want? No. And that's how they will operate. Don't like it? Put your emotions up against the configuration file. That's how this works. Understand the configuration file doesn't matter. It can literally dictate what you do. That being said, understand that vector is real. Understand that every sat that's bought by a bank or every sat that's bought by a service or a user on that service that is the truth. Like, that is their plan of attack. They can't control the network. They can't control the ASICs. They can't control the money. But what they can do is encourage people to buy. I don't know if they're going to be front-running orders game. That much I can't speculate on. I can tell you this much, that some major banks already have an app and already have a Lightning-like network. I say Lightning-like because it works consistently without issue and they can control it. And it works. I previewed this demo a year ago. And, you know, the dangerous part about it is that these are real. They're there. Their goal is they know they can't take Bitcoin head on the network and control it. However, if enough people are exposed to it, which the adoption cheerleaders want, which is great to some level, but also let's be realistic here, that they can then control all the sats. And while that doesn't sound like much, you figure $2, $3, $4, $8 million a year in sales, $10 million a year in sales, $25 million a year in sales. Their accumulation will far exceed what's in the available market that's available through the exchanges. They will buy up the exchanges. They will become the exchanges. And then next thing you know, they're controlling the institutions and the money again. So literally their long game has always been this play. There have been bankers and individuals who have spoken out on it or spoken that they weren't going to do this. But this has long been the plan. Because they realized once Lightning came out, there was a way to control this. And what people don't understand is they're not going to give you the keys. Well, how we win this revolution is that, yeah, PayPal is buying BitGo, or they're going to. They're on a buying spree, apparently. Mr. Chu, how we win the revolution is that we have to have people who are being sovereign and not going through these services and not promoting it. Like Pomp and all these other people who want number to go up, those people are going to create the problem. Because they're going to be like, NGU, buy from your bank, buy from this, buy, do this, do this, do this. You're going to make money, you're going to make money. But the reality is that they're going to make Bitcoin the biggest revolution that never happened. And I've stated that before. And the harsh reality of it all is that while people may sit here and sounds like, hey, Daniel doesn't know what he's talking about, the fuck I don't. Understand that you guys are watching firsthand, you guys and gals are watching firsthand what is going on. The truth is much grittier than the fantasy. And the reality is like you got people like, you know, and I'm going to say his name, and I think he's a great person, but like going parabolic, and you got A-Pump, and you got all these cheerleaders and the maxis who are NGU, institutions, and everybody coming to buy Bitcoin. And what's going to happen is they're going to control it, which you could say all you want, and the sovereign individuals can choose to remain using their peers and that kind of shit, but that means they're going to have to buy directly from miners, which is getting harder and harder to do because the miner isn't going to want inconsistent returns when they can just sell directly to a bank. Which then all of a sudden you just remove the entire value add proposition of Bitcoin. And so then Monero and other mining consensus protocol, coins such as like Burst and Dash and Digibyte and all these others are, and Litecoin and Dogecoin, those still contain the value because they're not going to be implemented in that way. And the reason why is because they haven't garnered support yet. So what you may see, Mr. Chu, is you may end up seeing Bitcoin go up really high, they can gain control, and then the next coins will come in to do that. And it will be this continuous game of transference. Some people will get really rich, most people won't. And then they're going to get taxed to hell and back. And then there's still no value add proposition for any of it. And the reason this is happening is because we, as a community, the silent minority, or actually the loud minority who've been speaking out against this, are laughed at and told we don't understand Bitcoin, blah, 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 blah. But Bitcoin was supposed to be censorship resistant, peer-to-peer digital cash. It is on the white paper. You can say that, well, that's just antiquated, blah, 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 blah. Well, the whole fucking software is antiquated if you want to go that route. So if we're going to call it antiquated, why the fuck are we still using it? Just to poke a little fun there. And getting back to the brass tacks of it all and how it all plays out is that banks and institutions will do this. This is their plan. It's been their plan for a long time. And so if you doubt this, just take an understanding is that you need to look at the value add proposition of Bitcoin was supposed to be sovereign money, and that it was supposed to be distributed, censorship resistant. And once you start removing those properties, Bitcoin is no longer Bitcoin. It is just Orange Coin and a bank app. And that's all people will really know. And that's why, the PayPal news, I kind of made these comments and people were like, oh, well, you just don't understand. You just don't understand. You're just being negative, Nancy, blah, 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 blah. No, this is something that I had called. I wrote an article about it last year. You can go take a look. It's called A Thread. It was posted in Altcoin Magazine on Medium. I've also talked about it before extensively at length with Carbon Based on DYOR, which was in September of last year, and that these were real threats. Now, many people may laugh at me and say, I don't understand, but here's what I will say. I've seen Bitcoin go from no value to where it is today. And understanding the attack vectors is something that most people don't do. Just like pointing out the attack vectors in big tech most people have overlooked, this War Dialing 2.0 article was eye-opening to many of you because you never thought about it. Consider that there are people who have long spoke about these things that you may or may not have given credence to listen to what they're saying. Most of you in this chat and most of you who are watching, listening at home, and thank you again for your support, most of you are aware of this, but the majority of people are not. Majority of these people are peddling t-shirts in hopes that their $300 in Bitcoin can go up to 3,000 to 30,000 to 500,000. That's what they want because they need the fiat. They want to retire. Well, technically, you can make a PR, Mr. Chu, and Blockstream, for the most part, and former members of Blockstream control the merge rights for Bitcoin. However, that doesn't stop you from running your own version of the software as long as it's compatible, just so you know. There are alternative peer versions and things like that that are out there right now in Bitcoin Core. There are a lot of things that people don't understand about Bitcoin and distributed networks. Same thing with Tor. And if you really want to kind of learn these things, learn about how distributed networks work, learn about how versions work, learn about how descriptors work, learn about how the networking protocols work. I know that it's crazy, but it's all software. I say that a lot, and people think that I'm stupid, but reality is reality. Bitcoin is software. And the moment that you get it out of your bias that it is more than software, you will begin to realize how simple and yet elegantly dirty it all is, because it is code. Same thing with other distributed networks, and same thing with other distributed services. And if you really want to like break Bitcoin down, it is a distributed service for most people. However you want to dice it, it becomes this very, very interesting and very, very, very feel of people not thinking, and they want to support KYC services, stacking sats, all this stuff. All of these are great and terrible at the same time. Great because you can make some money. Terrible because it's going to create problems. Yeah, you literally might have that, Mr. Chu, where you could say non-KYC purchase coins become illegal. Non-KYC wallets become illegal, and banks can filter who you send transactions to. And you may say, oh, well, that's not true. They're going to be able to let you do that. No. Banks don't even let you do that now. Banks don't let you control your money now. You think with software, which, by the way, Bitcoin is just software, that they're not going to control what you do with it? That's a fallacy. That's ignorant. That would be stupid. Why would they do that? This is their chance. This is their opportunity. But this is reality, game. Like you can say that it's not, but it quite very much is. Because there are already services and exchanges who are filtering who you can send out to. Coinbase already does this. So what's to stop a bank? Nothing. A configuration file. That is it. Or a series of configuration files. You will use yes, that is true, but the people in power are going to always keep it. And like you said, just right there, they're going to really strip Bitcoin of all of its value because the adoption is going to be with it. And by adoption, people are going to perceive it that, oh, because, it's easily available and easily purchasable, it's greatly adopted, but at what cost? You have to consider those costs. And those costs become the very value add proposition that makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. And, what I'm getting at here is that a lot of people have it in their head that all these people think that they're going to keep this shit on the up and up, but they're not. They have no reason to. Why should you care what a bunch of neckbeards or a bunch of people who think they care about their privacy, why should you care when you can make millions of dollars and control the whole fucking thing? It's just like the spice in Dune. Sorry, I'm grabbing some shit and I was resetting a battery so I didn't run out. Why would you ever sacrifice the control over the spice? You shouldn't. And the corn is the same thing. You control the spice will control the world, right? Or control the stars. Same thing with Bitcoin. They're going to control the corn. They're going to control the money. It's all about money. If you don't think it's about money, then you don't care about, certain aspects of it. I care that I can send it without ramifications. That's why I also support Monero. That's why I support trustless consensus. That's why I support sovereign chains. Same thing with my company. The issue is that these cheerleaders are blind by the idea of NGU, number go up. That's all they care about. They don't understand that number will go up, sure, but it will lose everything that it stood for. And they can claim, oh, well, you'll have sovereign individuals. Yes, but again, what happens when legislation comes in and tells the miners, if you're going to operate in the United States as a miner, you have to sell to the banks? They can do that. Yes, it did start with the Genesis block. And then Satoshi for 6 days tried to figure out how to get mining right. Block height 1 through 35 is him still testing. That's when there's irregular times, blah, 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 blah. If you understand the real story of Bitcoin, you'll know there's not immaculate conception. There was problems, the way addresses worked, everything like that. All of these things were shit that were going on because he was a developer. Developers oftentimes will test with, things and experiment, and they may not work. And, there's a number of factors that go into this. It did start off as a revolution, but it's going to not be a revolution anymore. And you can say that I'm wrong, but PayPal is setting the way, by the way. PayPal is literally setting the framework. Banks will follow. Banks and PayPal will utilize similar CEX models, build their own Lightning style networks to do instant channels, which they already have. And then, why the fuck do we need yours? Oh, our stuff's compatible too. Just now we can restrict who sends to what and to where. Don't believe me? It's happening now with PayPal. Look at what they're doing. You don't control any of that shit. You get a little fucking notification that says you control it. It's like the Twitter notification, man. You don't own shit. So it's really not a benefit. This price pamping is people's, dream because a lot of them are underwater because they bought it at 20,000 or 19,000, 18,000, whatever. And that's what they're hoping for. They're hoping that it goes up to like $25,000, $35,000, $45,000. I personally don't care. I need the network to be able to work so that those of us that are true Bitcoiners can actually continue to use it, and true cypherpunks, because that's what we do. We use the stuff. We pay for stuff. We pay for services. We pay for individual people to do work. We pay for products. We do what we can in this space. We try to do as much as we can without going to fiat with it. And it becomes this problem that what you're starting to see is the cheerleaders are inevitably winning and they're getting their wish, but they don't understand the consequences of their request. Banks and institutions are coming in, yes, but they are going to strip the hard money value out. And that's where it's going to get fucked. Yes. If you have questions, comments, please ask away in chat. Send me a text on Signal. Number was posted on the original tweet. If you want to call in. Seriously. I'm just sitting here. Just make sure you call in over Signal. I'll put you on voice for a second. Your number will not be disclosed or anything like that, but you can identify yourself if you'd like. But enough of the rant on what's going to happen, because it is happening. I think that Monero ends up taking a large market cap, Mr. Chu. The problem is that Monero will become illegal for exchanges, which will drive its value back up. I look for that to happen. And I look for people to really, really not understand why it's happening. And I think that it's a great thing that it's going to happen. And I like Monero. I like the properties that it's privacy, by default, and that it really works to that. I'm going to post a number in chat if you are interested in calling in. By all means, please do. Like I said, make sure you call on Signal because that's the only way the number will work. But this is an example of what war dialing can do. This is a prime example, but this right here was part of the experiment. If you want to. And so I know a lot of people are watching the debate and a lot of people are interested in having me talk more about this. So if you have questions, comments, ask, shoot me a signal or whatnot. Otherwise, I'm going to get off of here directly here in a couple moments. And I want to thank you all again for your support. Thank you again for reading a long-winded article there, and hopefully you learned something. The next set will be coming out once I get a chance to finish the recording and the documentation. I don't think we'll have a new monetary policy. I think the monetary policy will stay the same, actually. The monetary policy won't change. The banks will win over the control of Bitcoin, Rubicon FinTech, and I don't think that we're going to necessarily need a new monetary policy. What we will see, though, is banks will offload large amounts of Bitcoin as a way to sell off debt or to lower debt ceilings, things like that. don't think for a second the government doesn't have their hands in it, because I mean, ultimately, a lot of people say, oh, well, the government doesn't like Bitcoin. Yeah, well, they created SHA-256, which is the basis for it, and also, things like that. So it's very important. Yeah, thanks, game for joining. I appreciate your comments and questions, and thank you for the compliments. I appreciate you. If you have any comments, questions, or anything like that, everybody in the chat, please, you know how to get in touch with me via DM or, the Signal number if you absolutely want to chat. Again, the expression with this stuff is, the expression of all of this is that literally, again, that these tools and these services are flawed. And we talk about them, and we talk about how some of this stuff is not safe and everything like that. But yet we want to rely on the banks and the institutions. But going back to your question, Rebecca, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the banks are going to end up using Bitcoin as a way to dumb down some debt from the Federal Reserve, and they're going to use that as not any form of anything other than to dump the debt down. And they're going to use everybody else's money to fund it, by the way, and then circulation again. And so then they'll kill Bitcoin, or it won't die. It'll be there, and then they'll tax the shit out of the miners, make them only sell to the banks or to certain institutions, and that's it. Game over. They won't be able to sell to sovereign individuals, and then there'll be very little KYC-less Bitcoin, and there'll be very few people who are able to actually participate in an economic system not regulated by government, as they will be right back where we started 11 years later. Yeah, we will. I'm not saying we won't change to digital, but as far as the policy goes, like how we print money, we will still print money. Like, that's not going to change. We need money, we'll print it. That's just how it's going to be. We'll take on new debts. We'll continue to operate that way. And it's like, love it, love it, love it, love it. You're Raffy, you're Ruse. I love it. Love your name, by the way. Good handle. So yeah, I mean, like I said, ask away if you have questions, comments. I'm gonna shut this stream down in probably about 5 minutes, and then I'm gonna eat, and then I'm gonna get back to some hackery. And if anybody wants to BS and chat and whatnot, while I'm doing that, please by all means hit me up. I will be actively working on a number of things tonight. And then also some Cypherpunk Lab stuff as well will be done. And then once we get done with all the other stuff that is currently in progress that I can't really talk about, then I can make the announcement finally for a captain's log to do a proper one. Well, like I said, if you have anything, ask now or forever hold your peace. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes. And like I said, I want to thank you all again who are in chat, who's at Twitter, who's everything. I appreciate you all. I thank you all for your support. And like I said, if you're, interested in working with me on a project and or with the team at Cypherpunk Labs on projects as we collab, we are currently looking for people to do more with hidden services and things like that. But we are also looking for people who are interested, or I'm looking for people specifically for this particular project, who are interested in vet testing certain attack vectors against themselves. And, with that being said, you would need 2 devices, 2 separate numbers, and you will need a little bit of cleverness, a little bit of playfulness, but it's low-tech hacking. And, again, I want to thank everybody that helped out in making the article happen, as well as the Anon who originally disclosed this information to me. And also, like Rubicon FinTech for talking with me last night and coming up with the war dialing idea. And, it literally becomes this this set of what we are dealing with. And, it's just this constant world of change. And so, like, what we have to be aware of is that, just like my shirt says, 1984, it was not an instruction manual, and it's become one. And, again, support peer-to-peer networks, support distributed networks, support operators. And, I hope all of you have a great rest of the week, and I hope all of you have a even more wonderful weekend. And if you need me, DM me, hit me up on Signal, or you know, send me a telegram, whatnot.